Okay, hello everyone and welcome. Let's talk a bit about our solar system. By the way, there are many solar systems in the universe. I don't know if anybody knows exactly how many, but my knowledge is rather limited and will be confined to our solar system, meaning the solar system in which the Earth is one of the, shall we say, participants or locales. Okay, let's start with the sun. The sun is the source of all life. And what is the planet nearest to the sun? Planet is Mercury, Mercury. Okay, Mercury is so hot, no one could ever even get near there, let alone live there. Let's say it's probably 600 degrees Fahrenheit or more in the daytime. I mean, forget it. Okay, very, very hot. You can never have any kind of life that we are aware of. Nothing resembling human life could ever live on Mercury. Mercury is the nearest planet to the sun. The next nearest planet to the sun, number 2 from the sun, is Venus. Venus is also very hot. From what we know, probably too hot for human life or any life resembling humanity. The third planet from the sun is Earth, and we know all about Earth. We don't need to get into that, okay? The fourth planet from the sun is Mars. Now, there's been a lot of talk about Mars having a climate that could be conducive to human life. Parts of Mars, not all of Mars. Part of Mars is very, very cold, and we don't believe anything resembling human life could live on a certain area of Mars. That's the area that is farthest from the sun. The area that's closest to the sun is fairly hot. The problem with sustaining life is we can't seem to detect any water. Although what we do detect, our astronomers detect, is depressions in the land, in the Earth of Mars that could have held water at one time, but now are dry. Think about a dry river bed. Think about that. That's what we see on the sunny side of Mars. But it appears that there is no life of any sort on Mars at this time. There may have been life in the past. We just don't know enough about Mars. But that looks like the only planet where possibly at one time there could have been something resembling human life. Still, we don't know enough to say that that's really true. We can only guess. Okay. I need to think a moment, trying to think of the next planet. I believe it's Jupiter. Again, I'm not 100% sure of that. Jupiter is too cold for human life. That's it. No way. Okay. The next planet is Saturn. Again, Saturn is a planet with all the rings around it, these beautiful rings, multicolored rings. We think they're made of solid ice. When we talk about ice, Saturn is too cold for human life. There could be other forms of life on Jupiter, on Saturn, but nothing we can imagine. The next planet is called Uranus. Again, very far away, very cold, nothing resembling human life could ever live there. That's very, very cold. The next planet is Neptune. More cold. Forget it. There's not human life. There could be other life, but nothing resembling humans could ever live there. And the last planet, which is now called an asteroid, is Pluto. Pluto is the farthest planet from the sun. Of course, it's very frigid. There could be no human life. Again, perhaps another form of life. I don't know. We know very little about Pluto. Pluto is very small. We used to call it a planet, but now everybody calls it an asteroid for whatever reason. Okay, now, otherwise, we have an entire industry called science fiction books, science fiction stories, science fiction TV shows, science fiction movies. They'll tell you all kind of imaginative things about these planets. And I'll stress the word imaginative, because other than the moon, which is a satellite of the Earth, we know very little about any of these planets. And of course, the moon is a satellite of the Earth. It is not a planet. And we know some things about the moon. There's no real oxygen that we know of there. I don't know of any water on the moon. And I don't believe there's any gravity on the moon. But again, we're talking about the moon. We're not talking about planets. But our knowledge of what we call outer space, our true knowledge, which is not really reflected in science fiction magazines, books, TV, or films. Our true knowledge is only of the moon for the most part. Our other knowledge of these other, we call them heavenly bodies, meaning planets, satellites, galaxies, other solar systems. Our knowledge is really very little and has not improved much in my life. I can remember I started learning about these planets when I was about 10 years old. I am now 68, and I can tell you for a fact that our knowledge has not advanced much beyond the moon. We do know a lot of things about the moon, our moon. Now, these planets, I would include Mercury through Pluto. Many of them have more than one moon of their own. And we know nothing about those other moons, nothing. And again, remember, we're talking about one solar system. There may be scores, there may be hundreds, there may be thousands of solar systems in the universe. We don't know, and we certainly don't know anything about them. So our knowledge is what we call microscopic. Our knowledge is what we call infinitesimal. And all that means is our knowledge is very, very little other than the moon. One reason why is it's extremely expensive to get involved in these type of studies, because you need, we say, feet on the ground. And the cost of doing that is tremendous. In the past, the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, was ahead of the USA in space exploration. To my knowledge now, because of economics, they're doing little or nothing. The States used to do a lot, but the States has suffered with monetary inflation and recessions since 1970. So since the moon landing in 1969, the USA has not been doing much in outer space. I do understand, surprisingly, China has a space program. What they're doing, I don't know. I don't think it's much. India, everybody thinks is such a poor country, is not so poor, and they have their own space program. They have their own NASA, but I don't think they're doing much of anything. Again, the cost is prohibitive for everybody. And we talk about astronauts. Well, it's very, very, very difficult to become an astronaut. First of all, you need to be a fairly high-ranking officer, and I'm not sure of which service. I'm thinking it's the Air Force. I should know that. I'm sorry, I don't know. You have to be a high-ranking officer. That takes time and money and study, family connections, etc. Then you have to pass extremely difficult examinations to become an astronaut. Psychological, mental, academic, physical, and most people don't make it. Surprisingly, there have been a few female astronauts. They made it, and that's more difficult for them because of their body size. And men have bigger muscles because of genetics. Men have longer bones in their bodies because of genetics. And it may not be popular to say this, but men possess greater physical strength because of their genetics. So there's not many women in astronaut programs in the USA, but there have been a few. There are probably some now. There'll probably be more in the future. If you want to be entertained, there's some really good science fiction writers, and I would recommend them for entertainment. Surprisingly, some of these science fiction writers have almost been psychic in their abilities, saying, okay, someday this is going to happen, someday that's going to happen. So I don't know if they're psychic or if they just have great imaginations. Otherwise, the true literature, the real life literature, regarding these planets, as I said, is extremely little, mostly based on the on the Earth's moon, which is a satellite, and very little real material on these other planets. And to me, it's not even very exciting. But when you talk about the science fiction, it gets very exciting. But fiction is fiction. Stories have to be exciting, or people won't buy the books, they won't rent the movies, etc., etc. Okay, that pretty much sums up everything I know, which obviously is not much regarding outer space, planets, asteroids, satellites. It's solar systems, galaxies, the universe. Thank you very much for your time. That's all I could say.